Hello everyone, today I'm here to review Sonora. This is a flick and write game from Pandasaurus Games. Flick and write is kind of something different, so let me teach you how to play the game and then we'll come back and I'll give you my thoughts. So Sonora is played out over either 5, 6 or 7 rounds, and you just need to agree whether you're playing a short, standard or a long game before you actually start playing. Each player is going to pick a coloured pen, they're going to get a set of these discs, and then a starting player is going to have this quadrant facing them. The 4 quadrants on the main board feature on the 4 quadrants of your player board, but just note that this is going to change orientation, whereas this is always just going to be sat in front of you. If you really wanted, you could rotate it along with everything else to make sure it's in the same direction, but this one, for instance, the cave dweller, is this cave dwelling ruins up here. The game is played out in 2 phases. First of all, there's the flick phase, and then there is the using of the flicks, the actual writing phase for the flick and write. Now, this is very important. When you are flicking your discs, it's going to go in a 2-2-1. So you flick 2 discs, and then your opponent will flick 2. You do 2. They do 2. You do the final one. That's very important to know, because actually what does happen quite often in your first game is that you try and start alternating flicks, and it is 2 flicks, 2 flicks, then 1 flick. And also, if you get it in the middle, you are instantly removing it and actually putting it on any of the 4 corners to say that is what it's going to be. There is one thing to note, that during play you can use some of these bonuses. So if you've just done a flick and you're not happy with it, you can spend one of your acquired reflicks to take the one you've just used and reflick it. But it has to be the one you've just used. If you'd already started on the next one, you couldn't go back and change it. The other one is at the end of the round, before you start scoring, you can spend one of your swaps, and you start with 1, to swap the location of any 2 of your discs. That's going to allow you to tweak how and where you're scoring slightly. Then we get to the writing phase. So the first thing you must do is look at this lizard or cave ruins area, which is the top left part here. That's because this is done in turn order, and it's all about completing these shapes first. If we look here, this 3 is just overlapping this bonus space, so it doesn't get counted here, whereas these 2 are going to be counted for 3, and then there's a lizard here. So this 4 is also going to get counted. So in this case, I have 3, 4 times 2 for 8, so 11 in this area to use. And the blue player, who doesn't have any discs on lizards, and this one is overlapping this rabbit bonus, has none. So I would then use 11 in this. Now I could use these on any of these, but if you do complete one first, you're going to get a bonus. So that's 3, 6, 9, 10, 11. It's very helpfully sort of tells you how many spaces there are slightly underneath. You probably can't see that. It's tiny writing. That would mean I have completed this one. I get the 15 points at the end of the game, and I can use the bonus 5 on the rabbit section, which I'll come to in a minute how that one works, but it would be just using it as a 5, so we'll come back to that. Now I could have used my 11 across more than one shape. I could have, for instance, gone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then used the other 6 here, leaving this incomplete, but I could fill it in on a future turn. If we move over to the foxes, now in this case I'd got this 3 here on the double fox, but let's pretend that that 3 is actually just here. I match it up against the shapes. I can use the 3 or lower, and I'm going to be starting from here. but I'll probably, let's just draw the number 2, and I could just draw in a shape like this. And I've encircled one of the light green, and that's going to get you points at the end. There's also bonuses such as the owl, the rabbit, some re-rolls, and these discoveries. If I had actually got on that double bonus there, as I had in originally, I could use 2 3s or different ones. So once I've already used one, maybe then I do this, which then goes around a bonus. This owl section down here, which is this one here, is all about going down a number of steps and then seeing where you stop. So for instance, I don't have any in this area because of this 4, but let's say the 4 was there. I would cross off 3 stops and then circle the 4th one. Now I could have gone either way on this route, and on a future turn, like this 5 here that's an owl, would allow me 2 5s. So I could actually now go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm getting, in this case, 2 of these swaps and 4 points. What I've crossed off along the way doesn't matter. So you don't want to cross off high numbers, but you want to get down to these bottom areas here, because that's where huge points can be won. The final area down here, the rabbit section, doesn't have any discs in, but remember this person, the blue person here, did get 3 times 2. Now these are actually added up, so let's just move some discs over here. Let's say I had 8 in total for the rabbit area. Now I can cross off up to that amount. So starting from this middle one here, which is already done for you, let's say I go 3 there, that draws me a line there. Maybe I go for the 2 here. They now attach because they are adjacent, and I've got at least one of these here. Now I have 3 more to spend, so let's say I could go for this one here, but I'm going to go for here instead, and I'll show you why. Leftover ones can be spent to get some bonuses by completing these columns. So that's how the 4 sections work and how the individual rounds work, with how these bonuses can trigger double times on different things, bonuses from one area to another. But let's just have a look at an end of game board, because that might give you a little bit more of an understanding. So in this case, I had managed to, in total, I'd managed to finish 1, 2, 3 different ones. And I should say, if you don't complete it first, that top bonus is crossed off, allowing you only to gain the second one. So that was in total 32 points on the lizard front. Over here, I managed to do a lot of the different shapes, scoring each of these columns individually against the little table here. So 45 points, 40 points, and 32. Well, that was a big scoring one for 117. For the owls, again, you only look at what was circled. So this is 1, 4, 8, 8, and a 10 for a total of 31 points. I managed to get 7 of the black cacti surrounded, which was worth 14 points. I had 3 of these cacti surrounded, that was another 12 points. And then 1 of these nice green ones for 6 points. And that's how you score that. You add up your score from all of them and you see who wins. And that is how you play Sonora. So let's start off with the production quality. Now, there's something special about roll and writes, that genre, having, to me, wipeable boards. Realistically, you're not going to be playing through a huge pad of paper unless you really commit to playing a game. There's something slightly nice about grabbing one of the dry white pens and just scribbling over a player board as you're sort of playing. It just, to me, feels that bit more premium. Then we come and have a look at the board with these discs that you're flicking off. I think that's really quite a cool part. It's a cool component. I do wish that the discs had the number on both sides, because sometimes when you flick, They do flip over, and then you have to sort of very carefully turn them over, making sure whether they're over one of the zones or not. You just have to be a little careful with some of that. But overall, the component quality is pretty strong across the board. Now, the one thing I would say that is component related is that I do find actually it's quite hard to, in your first game, really pay attention and link this section of the board to the right section on your player mat. Now, there's an orange and a yellow and sort of two purple colours used. Yes, the illustrations match and it just took a little bit extra time than I think it should have done. The concept normally of a and right, a flip or a roll, is that either the pool of dice that you're taking from, everyone's got that same pool, or everyone's using the same thing that's been rolled or the same card that's been flipped. Now, that's not the case in Sonora. This is flicking, and you are flicking specifically onto the board, which means to some extent you can have bad flicks, someone else can have good flicks, and that can change the outcome of the game. Now, what is considered good and bad is going to definitely change depending on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to get an exact shape on that top right part of the scoreboard, if you're trying to get one of the higher up shapes, you're going to need a higher up number into that zone. And if you can't do that, well, your plan of your sort of slight strategy will fall apart. And that's where I like the flicking. It's fun for a few games, but after that, it starts to leave me with the thinking and the logics of, I wish maybe we all flicked one or two discs and then everyone uses the same things. You could use them in different ways. Everyone could be using those in the lizard to cover off different spaces. You could use it for different shapes in the fox area. You could go off in a different direction on the owl part of the board and stuff like that. Whereas you can come out of the game after flicking what you thought badly and it just always not quite getting into the zone you wanted, or it gets into the zone but someone else gets onto that bonus on the board. And again, it comes back to those bonuses. They're pretty fun and cool to get, but when you don't get them, it feels like a really anticlimactic round. If your 5 discs, none of them have landed on any of those specials, it's if your opponent's landed all 5 of their discs, it's like they're having double the amount of turns. And yes, you can say there's a bit of skill in flicking across, but because the discs are on the board, you could be bumped off or bumped onto, and it just means it feels lucky. It's fun for a few games, so if you're just planning on trying the game or playing it for a few games, those bonuses are fun to get and try and flick onto. But it does leave you after a few games sort of wishing that there was something that maybe you just chose which one of your discs got doubled, or something like that, just to mean it couldn't be so different for each player. One person could get super lucky and get lots of extra actions to spend on their turn. And I think that's where I sit on this game, really. It keeps coming back to the fact that it was fun, it is fun, but it also slowly starts to get a little bit frustrating. If you can't flick into the right area, or you do and then it gets nudged out, it doesn't always feel great. Now, the chaos of more players, if you're at 2 players, it's much less likely, unless you're really trying to aim for someone's disc, that it happens. But when you've got all 4 players, that's a lot of these discs flooding onto this board. Yes, they get removed if they go into that central hole, and you can just put it on your board and say, I'm using it for that when we get to the scoring bit. I don't want to be too negative on this because there are some great parts. I really like the way the 4 corners of your player board, they all work very differently and they're all quite cool and interesting choices. Do I try and go for the small shapes to try and get small amounts of points but quickly can finish them and maybe get some bonuses before my opponents? Do I go for trying to get lots of bigger shapes, and do I go for the bonuses on the shapy bits, the fox area? On the owls, every time you cross numbers off, you're not going to be scoring them. And that can mean you're trying to aim your lower discs into that area, so you're doing lots of little steps. But if you do a massive step, yes, you've jumped a lot of potential points, but the bottom is where the lots of points are. And then the final one with the rabbits, do you just sort of spend them for those bonuses that you can get, or can you get out to the edge again where the lots of points are? And there's chances to combo as well, where, you know, are you circling, putting a shape over one of the spaces that's going to allow you to do a rabbit movement over here? That might then give you an owl movement and different things like that. The combos do feel good when you can trigger them, and the ones from the board, unlike the doubling up combos from the sort of main board, from the flicks, they feel like you've done that. You've circled the right thing, you've used the right shape in the right way to get the bonus, and that feels good. That feels like a roll and write decision where you've made the decision, got a bonus and had a bigger turn, rather than just being a little bit lucky. Overall though, it's fun for a few games. I think the right audience will like this. There's certainly, you know, with all the discs being thrown onto this board, there's a good amount of chaos, which means a sort of hardcore gamer isn't guaranteed to win because there is a slice of luck in the game. So that's another positive or negative depending on who you are. All in all, I'll give it a 5.5. It sits in between those sort of 2 numbers for me, as for me it's not great, but I could see some people enjoying this one. Anyway, that is Sonora. I have enjoyed it, but it's tailed off relatively quickly, but you might enjoy it. And, well, until next time, make sure you check out other news and reviews on the Dice Tower.